Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Mishnah. I did it again. Take two. Beep. Good evening, and welcome to Mishnah Mastery. Boom, boom. Cue the theme music. We've got a great crowd on Zoom tonight, and for those of you joining us on YouTube, it is wonderful to have you on board as well. As we start Masechet Yoma. Yoma. Last train to Yoma. Masechet Yoma, which is all about Yom Kippur, and more specifically is about the avoda, the order of proceedings that the Kohen Gadol had to do in the Beis Hamikdash. That is the first 7 chapters, the first 7 prakim, and then we get on to the halachos, the halachot, the laws of Yom Kippur. So, without further ado, I've just been reminded by my better half that the learning tonight should be for the speedy recovery, for the refuah shalema of Dayan Ehrentreu and Rabbi Sachs, as per Chief Rabbi Mervis's wishes. So everything that we do tonight should be for the full and speedy recovery of Reb Cheloch HaKohen ben Blimela and Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi ben Liba. So without further ado, let us start with chapter 1, with the first chapter. You should have the text on the screen. Yeah, thumbs up if you can see it on the screen. Fantastic. And we've got it over here as well for you on the recording. And I've asked everybody also to have with them a copy of the Art Scroll Machzor. Well, not the Art Scroll, but the Yom Kippur Machzor. Mine is turned to page 558. And I will explain why a little later or a little soon. Whatever. Let's just get on with it, Rabbi Nick. Chapter 1. We are going in chronological order, ladies and gentlemen. We are going through the avodah. We are going through the process of Yom Kippur for the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, had to be pure when he served in the Beis Hamikdash. And we had to make sure that he was pure when the day would come. So it's a bit like now where we have to have COVID tests and isolate a few days before whatever it is that we need to be doing, be it a football match or a medical procedure or whatever big event is coming up. Got to isolate, keep yourself away from anything that could put your ability to perform in jeopardy. And the precedent for this, you could almost say, is the Kohen Gadol in the Beis Hamikdash. 7 days before Yom Kippur, he had to go into isolation. Says the Mishnah in Mishnah Aleph, Shivas Yamim Koden Yom HaKippurim. 7 days before Yom HaKippurim would start, Mafrishin Kohen Gadol Mebeiso Lelishkas Palhedrin. The Kohen Gadol would be separated and he would be placed in the Palhedrin chamber. Now, I haven't got myself organized quickly enough over here, have I? But we do have a map of the Beis Hamikdash, which I would love to show you now, if I can be quick enough. Can I be quick enough? What do we think? Oh, come on. I cannot be quick enough. I can't remember where I've left it. Oh dear. Come on, Rabbi Nick. Okay, well I will try and find that quickly. And if I'm able to, I will put that up on the screen for. Oh, here we go, Beis Hamikdash map! Ladies and gentlemen, we have got the Beis Hamikdash map. Let's get this up on the screen so we can see where the Lishkas Palhedrin was. Let me just do this for you now quickly. I'm really sorry. Very disorganized. Come on, Rabbi Nick. Get yourself together. Let's get it up on here as well. There we go. Okay. So now everybody can see my screen. That's going to look a little spooky. But over here, ladies and gentlemen, is the Lishkat Palhedrin. So the Kohen Gadol was isolated to this chamber just over here, 7 days before Yom Kippur. Why 7 days? Because that would be the maximum length of impurity that he would ever have to go through. So in order to make sure that he didn't run the risk of becoming impure and losing out on the opportunity to be in the Beis Hamikdash for the procedures of Yom Kippur, that is why he had to be separated 7 days before Yom Kippur. Okay, now I'm more organized. Let's continue. And they would appoint a deputy priest underneath him in his place. Shema Ye'era Bopasul. In case anything should happen to him that would disqualify him from serving in the Beis Hamikdash. One thing that's very interesting is as follows, that when it came to Yom Kippur, not only was he atoning for himself, not only was he atoning for the people, but he was atoning for his family, for his wife, and for his people. So what's very interesting actually is not only did he have a backup deputy Kohen, but we're taught that he actually also had a backup wife on hand, according to one opinion. So that if, God forbid, he lost his wife on Yom Kippur, there would be another wife that could be ready to step in and be considered his household. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Af isha acheres maskinin lo. They would even have a backup wife in the what's it called on the side of the theater, in the rafters, wings. In the wings. Thank you. They had a backup wife in the wings. Why? Shne'emar v'chiper ba'ado va'abeito, because he would have to be getting atonement for himself and for his house. His house refers to his wife. Beiso zo ishto. When the verse says his wife, it means his house. It means his wife. Amru lo. They said to him, though, if that was the case, in Cain, ein ledavar sof. There'd be no end to this. You'd have to have a backup wife, another backup Kohen. There'd be no end to the matter. And so therefore, it would seem that wasn't a universally agreed opinion. Continuing on to Mishnah base, discussing the preparations during those days. What would he be doing for a week? Would he be watching Netflix? I don't think so. Kol shivas hayamim huzorek es hadam umaktir es hakatores umetiv es haneros umakriv es harosh ve'es haregel. In those 7 days leading up to Yom Kippur, he would be practicing. He would be practicing different elements, different parts, different processes of the avoda, of the order of worship that he would be doing on Yom Kippur. So he would be sprinkling the blood, he would be burning the incense, he would be preparing the lamps, the menorah, he would be offering up the head and the leg of korbanos. Ush'ar kol hayamim imrat salah hakriv makriv. On all other days, he would also have the opportunity, if he wanted, to bring up these sacrifices, but that was his choice. Otherwise, it would go to other kohanim. V'shekohen gadol makriv chelek barosh v'notel chelek barosh. Because the high priest, the kohen gadol, would take the lead with being offered the opportunity to take part in these procedures, in offering a portion and taking a portion. He would always have the first dibs, so to speak, and if not, then it would go to the lottery to have those positions allocated to different kohanim. Continuing with Mishnah Gimel, not only would he be doing those practice sessions, getting ready to be able to do it on the day, but he would also be studying the order of the avoda, which basically perhaps means that he is learning through Parshas Achrei Mos, where the flow of the day is brought in the Torah. So the Mishnah says, Masru lo zakenim miziknei beistin. They would allocate for him elders, teachers from the beistin. V'korin lefanav b'seder yom. And they would read for him the order of the day. They would teach him what he's going to be doing, and he would start to visualize it. V'omrim lo, and they would say to him, Ishi Kohen Gadol, Mamayen, the Kohen Gadol, Kara ata b'ficha, you should read this yourself with your own mouth, Shema shachachta or Shema lo l'madata, just in case you have forgotten it, or just in case you've never learned it. Why would they need to say this? So what we learn is that in the second Beis Hamikdash, it wasn't always such a great situation. And actually, there were Kohen Gadols, there were high priests, who would buy their way into the position. And so whereas perhaps in the first temple, these would all be high priests who would be given the position and would be extremely well versed in all of the halachos pertaining to his role as a Kohen and his role as a Kohen Gadol. In the second Beis Hamikdash, that wasn't the case. And so it could even be that they had either forgotten it or they'd never learnt it. So that is why, certainly in the second temple, they would have to say this to him. Erev Yom Kippurim Shacharis, when the eve of Yom Kippur would come in the morning, Ma'midim Oso B'Shar HaMizrach, they would take him to the eastern gate, Umarvirin Lafanav Parim Va'elim Chuvashim, and they would pass before him oxen and rams and sheep. They would pass these three animals in front of him so that he would be able to familiarize himself with what is coming the following day, with the service. In order that he can start to visualize and prepare himself and become familiar with everything that he was going to do. And what we'll see is that once the day goes, the guy doesn't stop. He's going from one thing to the next, and this and that and the other. And so to be able to picture in his mind all the different steps that he was going to be doing was a very important part of the procedure. Says Mishnah Daled, they wouldn't let the Kohen Gadol sleep the night of Yom Kippur, because if he was to have any kind of nocturnal emissions, then he would be impure and he wouldn't be able to serve that day in the Beis Hamikdash. And so in order to prevent that from happening, they would keep him up. Says the Mishnah, Kol Shivas Hayamim, all of the 7 days before Yom Kippur, Lo Hayu Monim Imenu Ma'achal Mimeshta, they would not deprive him and withhold from him any food or drink. Erev Yom Kippurim Im Chashecha, when it came to nightfall of Yom Kippur, Lo Hayu Manichim Oso Le'echol Harbe, they wouldn't give him too much to eat, Mipnei Shamachol Mevi Es Hashena, because the food could make him drowsy. And he wasn't allowed to get drowsy because he had to stay up the whole night. And interestingly, the Gemara actually lists a whole bunch of foods that can make us drowsy. If you wish to know what they are, you'll have to check it out. Says the Mishnah, in Mishnah, hey, Misaruhu Zikne Beistin Zikne Kahuna. They would, the elders of the court would hand him over to Zikne Kahuna, would hand him over to the elders of the priesthood. And they would take him to the upper chamber of Beis Avtinas, of the family of Avtinas. V'hishbiyuhu v'niftaru v'halchu lahem. And when he was up in the chamber of the family of Avtinas, the family of Avtinas we mentioned last week or the week before that, they were the family who were responsible for making ketores, for making the incense. And they would make him swear that he would not change the order of the ketores, the order of the incense. And the reason they would do that is because the Sadukim, the Sadducees, would apparently try and bribe Kohen Gadols. They would try and bribe high priests to change the ingredients and to change the recipe. It would be very embarrassing. So in order to prevent that, they would take him to this family and they would make him swear that he's not going to do anything that he shouldn't be doing. Continues the Mishnah, Va'amrulah, they would say to him, Ishi Kohen Gadol, my man, Kohen the high priest, or sir, Anu Shluchei Beistin, we are the messengers of the Beistin, Va'ata Shlucheinu, and you are our messenger, Ushliach Beistin, and also the messenger of the Beistin. Mashbi'in Anu Alecha, B'mi Sheshikein Shemo B'bayis Hazeh, we adjure you, as it's translated there on the screen. We adjure you by the one who causes his name to dwell in this house, that you should not change anything that we have said to you. He would turn aside and weep, especially if he was a sincere Kohen Gadol, to have to resort to such an almost embarrassing process to promise that he's not going to change anything that's part of the system of the Beis Hamikdash. They would turn away and cry, oh, what has the world come to that we're having to tell our high priest that he can't misbehave? What has the world come to? Where is the chamber of Avtinas? I believe the chamber of Avtinas, it's, I don't recall exactly where it is, but it was either somewhere up here in an elevated level, or it was over, maybe it was over here. Oh, it's over there. There you go, at the top. There is the Lishkas Beis Avtinas. So don't forget, he's been down in the Pal Hedrin over here, and on Erev Yom Kippur he's coming up to the chamber of the family of Avtinas to be able to swear that he's not going to change anything from the process. Says the Mishnah in Mishnah Vav that he would have teachers to keep him up the whole night and teach him Torah. They would tell him interesting stories from Tanakh. They would teach him Eov and Ezra and Divrei Hayamim. Apparently at the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, Sefer Daniel was popular because it was in Aramaic and that was the language they all spoke. So the Mishnah says, Im haya chacham doresh. If he was wise, then he would do this himself. He would learn himself and expound the teachings himself. V'im lav, and if not, Talmidei chachamim doresh lefanav. Then he would have great rabbis on tap to be able to teach him. V'im ragil likros koreh. If he was familiar enough to read, then he would read himself. V'im lav, koreh lefanav. If not, they would read before him. Uvamei koreh lefanav. What would they read? So the Mishnah tells us, the Eov from the book of Job, from Ezra, Divrei Hayamim from the book of Chronicles, Zechariah ben Kavutal Omer, Zechariah ben Kavutal says, Pa'amim harbe karisi lefanav b'Daniel. Many times I often read in front of the Kohen Gadol, I would read the book of Daniel, as we said, because it was in Aramaic, and everybody, that was the, what's the word? The lingua franca. Thank you very much. Mishnah Zion says the, please.
Kohen Gadol.
Yeah.
Mr. Keir, I'm certainly not even to do with this. We were always under the impression that Kohen Gadol is like the main Talmud Chacham, but the reality is that it was purely a lineage thing that you got the position. It wasn't through knowledge.
Right. But especially in the second temple, it was a bit corrupt. It was a bit more corrupt than that.
Yeah.
I think there would always be Kohanim, but it wasn't father to son, father to son, father to son. It was given to, certainly in the first temple, quite possibly.
To be a Kohen is through your lineage, and then you say to be Kohen Gadol it was elected.
Yeah. Right.
But what I'm saying is that to be elected, you would have thought they would have been, the Talmud Chacham of the group, but clearly a lot of them weren't anywhere near that.
No, certainly by the second temple, the standards had slipped. Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
That's how the Hashmonite came into power.
That's right. Yeah. Says the Mishnah Zion in Mishnah 7. Bikesh lehisnam name. If he wished to sleep, if he wished to doze off, the Pirchei Kahuna makin lefanav be'etzbat sarada. They were the young Kohanim who were accompanying him to keep him awake. They would start clicking their fingers. No, wake up. They would say to him, Ishi, my man, Kohen Gadol, Amod v'hafek achas ala ritzpa. They would say to him, stand up and stand on the floor. Stand on the cold floor. Don't forget we're talking about stones, so that would help wake him up. And they would keep him busy until the time for shchita of the morning offering had arrived. And in that way, he would stay awake, they'd have no problems, and he'd be able to start the process. The final Mishnah of the first parak, we break away momentarily from talking about Yom Kippur, and we talk about the daily service, because that would also happen on Yom Kippur. And so what we're going to see as follows. At first, there was the process of the Trumas Hadeshen, removing the ashes from the previous day on the Mizbeach. The ramp, as we said last week, was on the south side of the Beis Hamikdash, and he would pick up a shovelful of the ashes in order to set it aside for a tithe. Then he would take 2 left turns to face east, and then he would deposit the ashes in the place appropriate for that, and that was done at midnight on Yom Kippur, because that way it would keep him awake. Says the Mishnah, B'chol Yom, Tormin es HaMizbeach, B'kriyas HaGever, or Samach Lo. Every single day, they would do Terumas Hadeshen, they would clear and remove the ashes from the altar, B'kriyas HaGever, at the sounding of the cockerel in the morning. That's my best impression. Or Samach Lo, or thereabouts, close to that time. Bein lefanav, bein la'achrav, whether it was before that time or a little bit after that time. However, B'Yom HaKippurim, on Yom Kippur, Mechatzos, he would start doing that process from halachic midnight. Uvargalim me'ashmur harishana. And on the Shalosh Regalim, he would start doing it from the first night watch, which is approximately 10 p.m. V'lo haisa kriyas hagever magas ad shehaisa azara melea miYisrael. And the sound of the cockerel, the rooster in the morning, would not start until, not that it wouldn't start until, but by the time the first crowings of the day would start, the temple courtyard was already full of people. People would flock to the Beis HaMikdash to be able to watch whatever part of the Yom Kippur service they could possibly get their eyes on. So already, by this early time in the morning, people were up and they were already at the Beis HaMikdash. Mazel Tov on finishing the first parak. And let's move now swiftly onto the second parak. And we're going to be talking about how they determined who did the avoda every day. So again, nothing specifically to do with Yom Kippur, but we're going to be talking about how they would figure out which Kohen was going to do which job. So they had 24 groups of Kohanim, and each of these groups would be on rotation each week. So over the course of 24 weeks, you would see every single one of these Kohanic priestly families being allocated positions. No, let me try that one again. 24 groups of Kohanim per week worked in the Beis HaMikdash. 7 groups worked on one day, and then the rest were on Mishmar. They would be guarding. So that helps us to understand the beginning. The next thing that we need to know is that the ramp of the altar over here rose to a height of 9 cubits, which is approximately 18 feet. So from here to here, the elevation would bring us to about 18 feet. At the end of the ramp was the fire, which was about 4 amos from the end of the ramp. And that helps us to understand what we're going to see now. Barishona, at first, originally, Kol mi sherotza lisromes hamizbeach toren. Anybody who wanted to remove the ashes from the altar would be able to do so. Uvizman shein murubin, and if there were a lot of people that wanted this particular job, ratzin va'olin bakedash, they would run up the ramp of the altar. V'kol hakodem es chaveiro ba'arba amos zacha, and whoever would get within 4 cubits, 4 amos of the fire, they would be the one that would win the race, and they would get to be the person with the merit of clearing the ashes. Vim hayu shneim shavim, if 2 people got there at the same time, hamamuna omer lahem hatzbiu, then the mamuna translates it that there as an officer, but it was kind of the person responsible for allocating the roles. He would tell them to stick their fingers out. Why would he tell them to stick their fingers out? It was basically some kind of little number game to be able to see who should get the position. Umahin motzin achas oshtayin. What would they put out? They would put out 1 or 2 fingers. But they would never put out their thumbs in the temple. They weren't supposed to stick out their thumbs. So there was some kind of fancy number game that they somehow would be able to then figure out who gets the position, and that is how they would allocate this position if 2 people had run up at the same time. Right, Mishnah base. Ma'aser. I remember this one. There was one time when 2 people were running up the ramp. And one of them pushed the other guy off the ramp so that he could beat him to the top. And he fell and he broke his leg. The Kevan Shirau based in Shebain Lidei Sakana, and when they saw that this was becoming a bit of a dangerous sport, they instituted that you should only be able to be allocated the position of removing the ashes if you are allocated by a lottery or by a raffle, whatever you want to call it.
Health and safety.
Pardon me?
Health and safety.
Absolutely. And they didn't even have Richard there. Amazing. They still figured it out. Arba Piasos Hayushan. They had 4 different lotteries. And this was the first lottery to be able to allocate that position. The next lottery that we read about in Mishnah Gimel had, pardon me?
Yes, sir.
The second lottery that we read about in Mishnah Gimel had 13 winners. And what would happen is that the person in charge would pick a number, and that person would get the job, and then the next 13 people would get the next 13 jobs. And that was how they allocated the next set of things. So they would be bringing the Tamid Shel Shachar, the morning morning offering, and the one in the afternoon, and that would be one of them. So let's have a look. Hapais Hasheni, the second lottery, is going to determine Mi Shochet, who gets to sacrifice the morning daily offering. Mi Zorek, who is going to sprinkle the blood from this sacrifice. Umi Medashen, Mizbeach Hapnimi, who is going to be responsible for removing the ashes from the inner Mizbeach, from yesterday's incense. The rest of the jobs involved carrying animal parts to the Mizbeach and the preparation of those parts. We will get to that. Umi Medashen es menorah, who is going to be responsible for clearing out the ashes from the menorah. And now we get to the parts of moving the animal parts. Umi ma'aleh eivarim lekevesh, who is going to be responsible for taking the limbs to the kevesh, to the ram. Says the Mishnah. Because first of all, they were going to be put down on the ramp, and then later they would be brought up. Says the Mishnah. Harosh v'haregel, who will be responsible for bringing the head and the right hind leg. Ushtei hayadayim, who will be responsible for bringing the 2 forelegs. Interestingly, by the way, this is backed up by science. The front 2 legs of an animal are actually its hands, and the back 2 legs of an animal are actually its legs. So this is accurate. The regel is the back right leg. The shtei hayadayim are the animal's 2 front legs. Ha'oketz v'haregel, the third allocation would be who takes the tail and the left back leg. Hechazeh v'hagera, who will be responsible for bringing the breast and the chest. The 5th one, shtei hadafanos, who is going to be responsible for bringing the 2 sides, the 2 flanks of the animals. And v'hakravayim, who is going to be responsible for bringing the innards. The 7th, 8th, and 9th allocations were to determine who gets given the responsibility for bringing the libations, the additional parts to a korban. Number 7, v'hasoles, who is going to bring the flour, which is really the flour with the oil. Who is going to bring hachavitin, who's going to bring the mincha, the hayayim, who's going to bring the wine. Shlosha asa kohanim zachu ba. There were 13 kohanim who would win these positions. Amar ben Azai lifnei Rabbi Akiva mishum Rabbi Yoshua. Ben Azai said before Rabbi Akiva in the name of Rabbi Yoshua, he disagreed with the order of the first 6, and he felt that the sheep should be brought in the order that it walks. So according to Ben Azai, derech hilucho hayakarev, the animal would be brought, the parts of the animal would be brought in the order in which it would walk. So for Ben Azai, he would say first you bring the head and the right back leg, but then you would bring the chest and the breast, because that's the next part of the animal that moves. Then shtei hayadayim, then the front legs, the hands, then shtei hadafanos, then the side flanks of the animal, then the oketz v'regel, and then you would bring the tail and the back right leg, and then hakravayim, then you would bring the innards. And in that way you are bringing the animal in the order in which it would walk. But it would seem that the first position of the Mishnah is going in accordance with the chashivos, the importance with regards to the size of these different parts of the animal. Says the Mishnah in Mishnah 4, Mishnah Dalet, Hapayis Hashlishi, the third lottery, Chadashim Liktores Ba'u V'Hafisu. The Mishnah says that new Kohanim would come up to be able to bring the incense. That's what the lottery would be. So the winner would get the opportunity to burn the ketores. And what's interesting is that burning the ketores was a famous segula for becoming wealthy. So actually this position, this responsibility would never be given to the same kohen twice. It's also one of the reasons why people may have seen Pitom HaKetoret, the text of the portion that talks about the incense, gets written on a cloth, gets written on a parchment, and people read it at the end of davening from parchment. And the segula as well there, that the parasha of Ketores is a segula for parnasa, for wealth, for getting rich. And that is why, by the way, there is an idea that one should be very careful when we read Pitom HaKetoret. Especially we read it at the end of Musaf on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. We finish Ein Kolokenu, and then we start reading Pitom HaKetoret. Excuse me. There is an idea that we should be very careful to read it carefully and meticulously, and that's all connected to this idea. It's also connected to the concept that if we were to bring the incense offering out of order or change the ingredients and the recipe in any way, that a person would be liable to the death penalty. And so one takes great care when they read this portion as well, to make sure that they read it correctly with the right ingredients in the right order. It's all part of the same picture. Finally, the Mishnah says, V'haravi, the fourth lottery, that went to everyone. Chadashim imishanim, that would go to all of the Kohanim, and that would be who is going to carry the limbs to the Mizbeach from the bottom half to the top. Who's going to get that privilege? One winner who is going to take up these limbs from the ramp where they had been placed down by different people, and who's going to take them up to the altar. Now, Mishnah Hey, on a regular day, how many Kohanim were needed to process a public korban? Says the Mishnah, Tamid Karev Betisha. On a normal day, the Tamid sacrifice, the daily offering, required 9 people. Well, sorry, my apologies. We will get into which day is which. But the Mishnah says, Tamid Karev Betisha, it would either be brought by 9 Kohanim, Ba'asara or 10 Kohanim, Ba'achadasar or 11, B'shnei Masar or 12. Lo pachot velo yoter. Wouldn't be brought by less than this, and it wouldn't be brought by more than this. Ketzad. The Mishnah asks how. Atzmo Betisha. The offering itself required 9 Kohanim. So on a regular day, it would require 9 Kohanim. Bechag, on the festival, on the holiday of Sukkot, Biyad echad slochis shel mayim harei kanasar. There would be another Kohen who would be allocated the role of nisuch hamayim, of the flask of water. And so there were 10 Kohanim that were required. Bein ha'arbayim, the evening offering, ba'achadasar, would require 11 Kohanim. Hu atzmo b'tisha, the offering itself would require 9 Kohanim. Ushnayim bi'adam shnei gezirei eitzim, and then there would be 2 people who would be needed to bring 2 logs of wood. B'Shabbos ba'achadasar, on Shabbos you would need 11 Kohanim. Hu atzmo b'tisha, 9 to bring the actual korban. Ushnayim bi'adam shnei v'zichei levona shel lechem apanim, and 2 Kohanim would be allocated the responsibility of bringing the 2 spoonfuls of frankincense that went to the table for the showbread. And when Shabbos would fall on Sukkot, and then there would be another person, which is why you would have 12. You would have an extra person carrying in his hand the flask of water for the Nisuch Hamayim. Mishnah Vav. Ayil Karev B'Chadasar. A rab would require 11 Kohanim to be able to process it. For a public ram offering, that would require 11 Kohanim. Habasar B'Chamisha, you would need 5 for the flesh. Hakravayim, you need another one for the innards. V'Hasoles, for the flour. V'Hayayin, and for the wine. B'Shnaim Shnaim. So, sorry, you would need 2 for the innards, 2 for the fine flour, 2 for the wine. So that is now 6, plus the 5 needed for the flesh, and you have got yourself 11 Kohanim. Says the Mishnah, in Mishnah Zion, the final Mishnah for the second chapter, a cow would require 24 Kohanim. Says the Mishnah, Par Karev Ba'asrim Ba'arba, you would need 24 people for the bringing of a cow. Harosh v'haregel. You would have, whereas before it was one Kohen who brought the head and the back leg, you would require two. So, sorry, you'd actually require three. Harosh be'echad, the head would be brought by one Kohen, and v'haregel b'shnayim, and two Kohanim would be required for the back right leg. Ha'oketz v'haregel, when it comes to the tail and the back left leg, ha'oketz b'shnayim, two people would be required for the tail, v'haregel b'shnayim, and two people would be required for the back left leg. Hechazeh v'hagera, the chest and the breast. Hechazeh be'echad, the chest would require one. V'hagera b'shlosha, and the breast. Have I got those translations right? The breast by one, and the chest would require three. Shtei yadayim b'shnayim, the two forelegs would require two kohanim. Shtei defanos b'shnayim, the two flanks would require two kohanim. So we're up to 15. Hakravayim v'hasoles v'hayayin b'shlosha shlosha. The innards, the flour, the wine would require three kohanim each. So we're adding 9 onto our count. Bameh dvarim amurim. When are we talking about? The korbanot sibur. We are talking about a public offering. Aval b'korban yachid, when we're talking about a private offering, imratza lahakriv makriv. But when it comes to an individual offering, if a single kohen wanted to be responsible for all of the parts, he would be entitled to. Hefshetam v'nituchan shel elu va'elu shavim. But when it comes to the stripping and the cutting of the sacrifices, then the rules would apply for public or private offerings. Mazel tov on completing chapter 2. But before we end off, let's just have a look at the machzor for Yom Kippur. As I said in the art scroll on page 558. For those of us who are familiar with the Musaf media, we will know that we get to the point where we say, we get to the point of Unasan et Tokef, we get to Kedusha, we go through the initial paragraphs after that. Once upon a time before COVID, we would sing V'chol Ma'amin, V'chol Ma'amin, V'chol, 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 V'chol. Yeah. Then we would get to Aleinu, everybody would lie down on the floor, and we do that part. And then shortly after that, we approach the section that we call the Seder HaAvodah. And in the Ashkenazic liturgy, we start off with a kind of poem to start us off. But then on 558, we really start to go through the process. 559. Joining him were men of understanding, the elders of the Sanhedrin, telling him, please read the laws aloud. At dawn of the 9th, they would stand him at the eastern gate and lead before him the beautiful offerings of the day. Now this is actually starting to make some sense to us. As sunset approached, they would reduce his food. We've read that. Lest the impurity of a whitish emission befall him in his sleep. The elders of his tribe would lead him to teach him the incense procedure. They would adjure him to make the cloud of incense smoke within. His flesh would shudder, and he would weep at having been suspect. They too would withdraw, and their tears would flow. This is all of the content that we've seen in our Mishnahs. They would cry because how could we suspect these people? He would expound the oral law. He would read from the scripture. Those surrounding him would expound to keep him awake until midnight. Joyously, the Kohanim drew the first lot for the privilege of removing the ash. Again, they would draw lots for clearing the ash from the inner altar menorah. For the incense service, new candidates would take part in the third lot. All joined for the fourth lot to prepare the offering parts for burning. And then we get to page 561, and we'll do that next week. So that is all we have time for, ladies and gentlemen. Come join us for the after party on Zoom. But for now, to everyone watching on Zoom, on YouTube, we wish you all a wonderful night, and we'll see you again next week for more Mishnah Mastery.